Hello everyone, welcome to React tutorial. So we're going to continue our web development activities using React. So today, before jump over to the main topic, I would like to cover another tutorial for JavaScript, that how we can use the filter method of an array. So that's a very important knowledge that we need to implement today's logic into our code. So before I jump to the main work, let's go over some practice. What is a filter array? So let's say you have a problem that return an array of all the values in the ages array that are over 18, that are 18 or over. So let's declare an array. So the name of the array is ages. So let's say you have some value inside the array, some integers value, 32, 33, 16, 40. Okay, so basically you need to return an array of all the values in the ages array that are over 18, that are 18 or over. So here, if we take a look, the array, the value we have, so if we return the array based on this logic, it should return 32, 33, and 40. It will exclude the 16 because only one value is less than 18. 8 is less than 18. So how we can do that? We can achieve that results using filter method of an array. So let's create a function. So always remember that the callback function of the array method should be the callback method for an array. It should be a function. So we have seen that we have used map is an array method. Then we are using today filter is an array method. So all the array method should return a callback function. So let's create a function. We can name of the function check adult, and it's just a one return statement to return. So the parameter we have is age. So return the age more than equal to 18. So all the return the age which is 18 or over. Okay. So then now let's print it out. Console.log. So is a array method. So we're gonna use filter. So the name of our array is ages dot, you see the filter. So inside the filter we're gonna pass the callback function name. So our function name is checkAdult. That's it. Let's go to terminal and run it. So it's node tutorial.js. You see it returns an array with the value 18 or over, 32, 33, 40. So as we have learned in the last tutorial, the arrow function in JavaScript. So this is the first approach. Since in our work we are using arrow function, so it's a good practice again how to convert this into arrow function. So first approach. So the second approach, let's convert the upper one into a arrow function. So check adult equal to, so the parameter we have is age. We have learned if there is only one statement we can fit into one line. So just type age greater than or equal to 18. Done. Let me comment this out. And let's name it. This is checkout2, and I can name that function checkout1. So just to distinguish different approach. And same is we're gonna leave as it is. Just checkout2. Let's run it. Should return the same results: 32, 33, 40. All right, so let's follow the second approach, that everything we can fit into one line. How? So check adult 3 equal to the name of the array, ages, filter. So we can fit in all together. The callback function, we can put it inside here. So inside the filter parenthesis. So the callback function, we need a parameter called age, fat arrow. Then since it's an only one value, we can just leave age greater than equal to 18. Okay. Either you can use the word return, or you can leave it as it is, since it's only one statement. And comment this out. Then we need to remove the word called ages filter. And check out all three. So since the enter things is stored in this function name, so this is the name of the function. So when you do that, you need to put the parenthesis. So this is third approach. Let's test this out. Okay, child is not a function. Okay, is a variable. Okay, sorry. So basically this is the function inside, so we return the results into a variable. There we go. So we accomplish the whole thing in just one line. So multiple way we can done it. So I have tried to demonstrate to you all the approaches that we can follow. All right then, so we understand what is filter. Basically, based on the condition, you can filter it out, the data of an array. So another thing I'd like to share with you, which is what is the uses of React Developer Tools. So we're going to use a lot the React Developer Tools. So first of all, I would recommend to you to go to this website, React Developer Tools. Search it in Google. Then once you go there, you can add as an extension. So since I already added to my Google Chrome extension, so just add it. So once you add it, so once you add it, so go to settings. So go to more tools from your Google Chrome, then go to extension page. So once you go to extension page, so in your React Developer Tools, click on details. Make sure you enable this option, allow access to file URLs. You just enable this option. Otherwise, since we are using the local host is not is not a is a private network. So in order to work on your private network, you need to enable this option. So allow access to file URLs. All right. So let's go back to our work. So let's go to the file called counter.jsx. So first thing, we're gonna add a button called delete. So basically, we're gonna implement the logic that we can increment the value and we can delete the element in the web page. So right after the increment button, let's add a button called delete. So this simple approach, the element called button, the name of my button is delete, and changing the style of the button or color of the button, we're going to use the JS attribute called class name equal to, so the class name is select the button. We're gonna make the color of the button is red. So another piece of information. So since I told you in the first lecture that how you can change the color. So this information I got it from the Bootstrap. So if you go to the page, the web page Bootstrap, okay. So in the Bootstrap, go to documentation. In the documentation, if you click on the components buttons, you're gonna see all the information that I capture it. So you can see the primary color, secondary color, success color, danger color, warning color, info color, light, dark. So all the class information is given over here. So this in JavaScript. So if your file name is JS, you're gonna put the information like this. So, but since we are using JSX, so JSX refer the class is equal to class name. Okay, let's go back to our code. So we are creating a, so and the button color I would like to put is kind of red. So button danger, let's make it the same size and we have the increment, and let's put a space. There we go. As you see, is been updated already here. So delete is added. So we need to implement the logic so that this delete button actually works. It's supposed to work anyway. Okay, so let's because in our last class we have seen how to capture the value from the state property, which is now located in counters.jsx. So we're gonna implement the logic that the delete button can trigger in counters.jsx, the counters class, so that we can use the prop property to access that attribute. So now in our counter class we have just state, and basically we return, then in the counter class we added those information. So we created some attribute, key, value, and ID. So we're gonna create another attribute here, so that attribute can be accessed through props. So let's create a method called handle delete. So handle delete, let's make it as a arrow function. So we need we need to have a in a parameter, we need to have counter ID as a flat arrow function. So let's create a constant, name it filtered counters. So what are we gonna do, perform? So whatever the ID is, we're gonna click, delete only that ID. So that's logic we are trying to perform using the array filter method. So this dot state dot, our array name is counters dot filter. So inside the filter we need a parameter, we can name it C, stands for counter. We need an arrow function. So over here what we are trying to implement, so C dot ID not equal to counter ID. And then this dot set state. So set state, we're gonna set the state of our state property. So the property we have is counters, and set it to assign the filter counters value. I'm sorry, so it's gonna be under curly braces. So it's complaining because the attribute is in curly braces. Okay, so so what does it do? Basically it's, let I add the comments here so it's make it clear. So what is trying to do? So the filter method, we just learned what you do. The filter based on the condition, it will filter the data, whatever the condition you want to implement. So what I'm trying to implement here, so these dot state dot counters, so this is our counters array, filter the array. So filter the array. So the ID is not equal to counter ID. So filter all the value inside the array. So whatever the ID we are returning and the ID we are passing. So return every set. So this set state actually return a new array. So what's the array is returning? So if this provided ID, so returns everything if this ID not equal to the ID inside the array. So let's say we pass an ID call, so our counter ID we call counter ID, we have our counter ID value is 3. So if you click on this delete, so it triggers the counter ID value 3, so it goes inside the filter, and the filter, the condition we put, return everything except this ID. So counter ID not equal to this user provided counter ID. So it will now return 1, 2, and 4. So it will, this is the set state is actually setting the value of the array. So this filter counters has now three filter counters array has now three values. So ID1, ID2, and ID4. So this is how the filter method works, the logics. So now we need to add this into our counter element. So inside the counter element now, so we can create a event. So this is the event we're gonna create by ourselves. So we can name anything we want to. So give a logical name. So on delete. So since we're deleting an element, so we are creating an event called on delete. So we're gonna inside the on delete we're gonna call the instant of the method. So the method we have is handle delete. So this dot handle delete. Okay, so let me remove this. I just explained for your understanding. So now we can access to this into counter class. So it has 4 attributes: key, on delete, value, ID. So now let's see the uses of developer tools, React developer tools, how we can see. How do I know the props can access this value? So right click, inspect. So inside inspect, once you add the React developer tools, these two will be automatically added into your Chrome developer tools. So click on components. You see, so the components has now 3 key 1, key 2, key 3, key 4. If you hover the mouse, it will do the highlight for you. So now as you see the props, so in the counter element inside the counters class, we have these props available. So key, basically the props cannot access it. Key is a reserved word. So to uniquely identify in an element, we can use the key attribute. But the other attribute, the props can access. So ID, as you have seen. So since we highlighted 3, so if you highlight the key 1, the ID is 1, the value is 0, and you see the on delete function, on delete attribute that just now we have created. So props can access all this information. That's what I'm saying. And as you see, the state value is 0. So this is really useful. So whenever we are using the props, using the developer tools, we can visually see that what are the attributes that props can access to the parent class. So here the parent class is counters. So in the counter class, we're gonna access all the attributes of the parent class using props. So I hope it makes sense to you, and we're gonna use more in future the React developer tools down the line. Okay then, so let's go back to our code. We're gonna go to counter.jsx. So inside the counter, we have created a button called class name. So I'm gonna create an event. So the event I'm gonna do on click. So it's a JSX attribute. So I'm gonna add that attribute on click, and using the props, these dot. So another things I have explained to you last class, that inside the if you have a parameter in your method, so the method we have has a parameter. It's called counter ID. So this, if you have a parameter in a method, then you need to use that in a arrow function, fat arrow function inside the attribute. So on click, so we are going to create a arrow function. So this arrow function, this dot props dot, the name of the attribute is on delete. So on delete. So the on delete has a property, has a the parameter. So the parameter is ID. So this dot props dot ID, which is counter ID. Okay, so we added a JSX attribute in the button. Is called on click. So if you hover the mouse, as you see, is a JSX attribute. So the class name, so this is JSX attribute inside the element. So using the props, we can access all the attribute that we have declared inside the counter. So we declared the attribute key, on delete, value, and ID, and through the props you can accept the key, you can access the rest of the attribute, on delete, value, and ID. Okay, so in the counter class, what we have done, we have added, we created a attribute on click inside the on click. Since we have the method we created in the counters class has a parameter counter ID, so that's why you need to put it into a callback function. So the callback function is an arrow method, is arrow function. So you put a parenthesis arrows, fat arrow, these dot props dot on delete, the on delete the attribute we have. So inside that we pass the parameter. Okay, so now let's do some work and do some cleanup. So okay, so now in the counter class, in counters class, as you see, we have value and ID. So let's say in future, if your array has more, the counters array has more value in future. So what are you going to do? We have to add it. You have to create more attribute inside the counter element. So that's not a good way of approaching it. So regardless the number of item in the array, we want to find a way that you can access everything with a minimal amount of code. So let's remove the value and ID, and let's remove that. So instead of that, you can create an attribute called counter equal to, you can then put counter. So you create a attribute called counter and you passing over this counter. So as you see in the map, this counter has, you see, I hover the mouse, the parameter ID and value. So you just pass the counter, so the props can access both ID and value through this counter parameter. So if you hover the mouse, you see it shows ID and value. So we reduce the number of line of code. So in future, if you add any more value inside the array, it will show it to you. Okay, let's save it. Let's go back to counter class. So now update the code since we are no longer using ID and value in the props. So we are no longer using this information. So let's update these props. We can access to the counter attribute dot value. Before I do this, let's check it out in developer tools. So inspect it as I told you. So you see here, now the props can access counter and delete, because right now we have three attributes in counters class: counter attribute, on delete function, on delete attribute, and key attribute. So since key is a reserved attribute, we don't see those information, but you're gonna see right here what are the attributes the props can access. Cool. So value, so same thing, this dot state dot value, we're gonna implement that. Yeah, so so we have a state. Okay, that's good. So state, we have value. So now where okay, here. So in props.id we have to put counter dot id. So we have to put counter dot id. Okay. Then in format count we also have use value. So these dot state. So we need to update this. Okay, this is good. Okay, so I believe we replace everywhere the ID and value if there is in hard coded. So now props counter dot value everywhere replace props counter dot ID. Okay, let's save the work and make sure it's working. So let me refresh the page. So increments working, working. If I delete, okay. Okay, so let's test it out. Make sure you save all the work that you have done. So this is the counters class, this is the counter class. So increment working. Okay, delete also working. If you refresh, you're gonna see everything. So you can see delete is working. Cool. So that's the end of this tutorial, today's part. So the things we have learned today is very useful stuff. First of all, we have learned how to use the array filter method. So we implemented this array filter method right over here. So we created a method called handle delete. Basically, it's gonna delete, perform a delete action based on the user input. Then we have created a attribute called on delete. So we created an event called on delete. So inside that on delete event, we pass the instant of the method, which is handle delete. Then we have previously the attribute ID and value. So instead of typing individually, we can all consolidate together. Just pass the enter parameter, counter parameter inside a attribute we created, counter. So that's pretty much. Then we move to the counter class. In the counter class, we created a new delete button. We colored the button is red. So then we added an attribute called onClick. We onClick event inside the button, and we are using the props to access the attribute inside the counters class. So the attributes is onDelete. So since it has a parameter, so we need to pass it into a arrow function. So in the arrow function, we call the name of the attribute event is onDelete. Then inside there as a parameter, we pass the counter ID. So everything then we instead of individual state, we use the word called props dot counter dot value. So previously we used to have these dot props dot id. So instead of that, we are gonna leverage the counter attribute that we declare into the counter class. Then make sure you update everywhere. You used to capture the value using the props.id. So instead of those, it should be props.counter.id and the props.counter.value. And make sure every places you have updated so that the changes is reflected on the web application. That's the end of the lecture today. So we're gonna move on. We're gonna continue the next development phase into the next lecture, and more interesting stuff we're gonna learn into the next lecture. Thanks a lot. Please do subscribe into my channel if you like the video. Give a thumbs up and please share with your other friends. Thanks a lot.